It's the 3 on PLAXtv.
Yeah. What's good, YouTube? It's your boy PLAX9 back with another episode of the 3 on PLAXtv. And this episode is about Pat Bev, Patrick Beverly, and how I think that he will make a good coach one day if he decides to become a coach one day. So, people talk a lot of stuff about Pat Bev. And I don't think it's warranted. I don't think it's warranted because, one, he wouldn't be in the league if he was as bad as people act like he is. That's fair. Like, if it wasn't merit to his defense and his heart and what he brings to teams wouldn't keep adding him to their roster. Like, even LeBron James, GM LeBron, thought that he could help remedy and offset Russell Westbrook a little bit with the Lakers. That didn't work out because Pat Bev ain't the greatest shooter in the world. He's not terrible, but he's not the greatest either, so I don't think that was gonna offset Russ too much. But he brought heart to the team, and as far as I understand, they liked him. You know what I'm saying? But I don't think he would still be in the league, and I don't think he would have as long as the career that he's had if there wasn't merit to what he does on the basketball court, right? And I think just over time, I think people have lost sight of the little things in basketball. It's all about, like, I've talked to Rick about this numerous times when it comes to Draymond Green, because Rick thinks he's like useless, and I don't believe that, or he think he's expendable, and I don't necessarily believe that. And it's the same thing with Pat Bev. I feel like people are so just like focused on like points and crossing people over and dunking on people, and just that the highlights of it all, that they forget that you need those garbage players on your team. You need those guys that might not score they only go score 2 points, but they get you 8 rebounds and 6 assists and 3 steals and 2 blocks. You need those guys. You need that guy that's going to check the best player on the other team for 48 minutes, not touch the ball once, and not complain, and all he did was set screens all day and play defense. You need those guys. You need those guys to win championships, and that's just it. You need those guys to be the heart and soul of the team, because a lot of star players like Kevin Durant, that was a jab, I'm sorry, like Kevin Durant and people like him, they might be great scorers or great two-way guys, but they're not leaders. They can't lead a team. They can't rally a team to do anything. You see what I'm saying? And you need those guys, and I don't care what nobody say, you need those guys on your team. But that's a whole separate video. Regarding Pat Bev, I was just trying to say that there's merit to his value to the NBA and to teams. Only, like, it's not a lot of players that give it their all every single game. Who? Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Pat Bev, PJ Tucker, maybe. It's not a lot of guys that give it their all every single game. LeBron James. It's not a whole bunch of guys that do that. Some guys take nights off. Some guys, just don't come to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have those situations with a majority of the league, but it's only like a handful of guys that come to play every single time. And Pat Bev is one of the top guys that do that. Again, he's not a superstar. He's not a great player. You can even say he's not really even a good player offensively and stuff like that, but he brings it. And he's a defender. And he's a leader. And he has heart. You can't buy that, man. You can't buy that. I want Pat Bev on my team, depending on who I have. You know what I'm saying? But that's just one of the points. On top of him being the heart and soul of teams and playing hard and always giving it his all every game and all that stuff that I just said, he knows the game. Like he's not LeBron level, but he's definitely LeBron-esque on his knowledge of the game, because you know that those clips that go around of LeBron breaking down like 6 plays back to back or whatever in random games. Pat Bev did that same thing in one of the Chicago playing games. And I was like, that's what sparked this conversation, because I was like, yo, Pat Bev knows his shit. Like, he not just out there running around tackling people. He know his shit. He knows his shit. Almost photographically knows his shit on the defensive end. It was almost scary. I was like, I've only seen LeBron do that shit. And I'm sure it's probably other players that could do that, but I've only seen them two do it. The 6 straight plays, play-by-play, off of memory, no video. I've only seen them two do that. I'm sure it's more players. Again, I'm sure it's more players, but I've only seen LeBron James and Patrick Beverly break down 6 consecutive plays from a game like that. I'm not trying to act like Pat Bev is like some superstar or nothing like that. That's not the premise of this video. He's not. He's an average, below average guy as far as like, you know, just all around game. I just like the heart that he brings, the leadership, the defense. I like all of that stuff because that stuff is important. He's a garbage player, right? But the reason I think another reason why I think he could be a good coach is because other garbage players that might not have been that great, but they were pivotal to teams because they were those garbage players, were Pat Riley, Greg Popovich, and Phil Jackson. Not saying, hold on, before y'all hop on my bumper, I'm not saying he gonna be them. I'm not saying he gonna be them because those are the cream of the crop. Those are the greatest coaches of all time. But I'm saying he has potential to be good because he's another garbage player, hustle player, defender, the guy that's diving for basketballs and checking the best player on the other team and all of that stuff. He is like those guys because that's what they were in college and in the NBA. I don't think Pop was in the NBA. He just played college, I think. But Pat Riley and Phil Jackson were garbage players that played defense and checked the best players on the opposite team, dive for the ball, hustle for rebounds, move the ball around, and set screens. That was their job. And they did it well. Phil Jackson did it so well, he got a championship. He won I think he won both championships with the Knicks, the only championships that the Knicks have. And I think Pat Bev falls into that category. Somebody that's smart and knows the game, might not be good enough to be, you know, an all-star or superstar level guy, but he keeps himself in the league because he's smart and he plays hard and he defends. And he knows how to rally the team together, whether it be making plays or yelling at somebody. And if that's not a connection, I don't know what is. Because Pat Bev is literally what Pat Riley and Greg Popovich and Phil Jackson were for their teams when they played. Some of y'all watching probably didn't even know that Pat Riley and Phil Jackson was in the NBA and Greg Popovich played basketball in college. I think it was like Army or Navy Pop played for, something like that. That's why him and David Robinson was so cool. But that's a separate thing. And I'm not saying that Pat Bev will be them. I'm just saying he has the potential to be good and maybe possibly be as good as them. But not just with the scrappy players, but with just mid or not so good players as a whole. Those guys always end up being good to great coaches, like Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr is a great shooter. He's one of the greatest shooters in NBA history, maybe top 10, maybe top 20, right? But he's not really a great player. He was a role player who helped teams win championships because he was smart and he could knock down a motherfucking open shot. You see what I'm saying? And he wasn't the greatest defender, but he tried. He put in effort on defense. He was smart, put in effort on defense, even though he wasn't the greatest defender, and he could knock down a motherfucking shot. And he's also one of the greatest coaches in the history of the NBA. So my theory still checks out. It doesn't necessarily have to be a scrappy player, but just mid to, I don't want to say bad, but not great player, like mid to lower level players, majority of the time end up being good coaches. Ty Lue, another one. Doc Rivers, another one. Weren't the greatest basketball players, but they were smart. They knew the game. They played hard, and they were in the NBA for a while. They were good enough to stay in the NBA. And for us civilians, in comparison to us civilians and all the guys overseas and in the G League and stuff like that, that's pretty fucking good. You know what I'm saying? To my next point, the only people that hate Pat Bev or talk like shit about Pat Bev are people he play against on a regular basis, or like franchises, or not even on a regular basis, just in general. People he play against, or like team fan bases that he plays against. So only his opponents hate him or talk shit about him or don't like him. His teammates, the fans in the cities that he plays for, his own little fan base that he has, love Pat Bev because of the reasons that I named before. Because he plays hard, because he keeps his teams into games on emotion alone, and he makes plays too. Don't get me wrong, but on emotion alone, he keeps his teammates going. He just makes timely plays on the defensive end and sometimes on the offensive end too. But his teammates and his hometown fans of whatever city he's playing in love him because of those things. Along with like his podcast, because I didn't know, like, that gave me a dive into like more of him personally, because I haven't like heard Pat Bev talk a whole lot besides a few interviews and stuff like that. But what kind of like locked me more into this him potentially being a coach thing was his podcast, because he's just so well spoken and he knows how to interact and articulate himself, which leads me to believe that he can interact with his team because he interacts with his teammates and his coaches and the fan base, and on his podcast with Ron, he knows how to speak and get his point across. Like in Minnesota, for example, their best season in a while was when they had Pat Bev on the team. They made it to the play-in. I don't think they made it to the... Yeah, they did. They made it to the play-in. They won both of their games because of Pat Bev. They had camaraderie. They were playing harder. They seemed tougher. As tough as Karl Anthony Towns can be. You know what I'm saying? Like, they believed and they were locked in. And the only thing that I could attest that to is Pat Bev. Because prior to that, they wasn't doing a goddamn thing. And after that, they played better in theory, but that was because they were more talented on paper. They had Rudy Gobert, they had Cat, they had Anthony Edwards, and they had D'Lo for a minute, even though they got rid of him. They had more talent, but it was the same. It was the same end result because they lacked the heart. Cat ain't the leader of that team. Anthony Edwards, I love him, and he's a future superstar, I believe, but he young. He young as hell. Rudy Gobert, y'all know how I feel about Rudy Gobert. He's a fucking bum. They didn't have it, and when they traded for Gobert, I was like, and especially the way it ended, because Pat Bev ended up getting bought out by the Jazz, I thought they should have tried to keep Pat Bev or tried to get him back at least. I truly believe Minnesota would have went further than they did if Pat Bev was still on the team. What do they beat Jokic and them? Probably not. That's crazy, but they go further. They win more games. than what they won. I truly believe that. Because they were a better team with Pat Bev. And they continue to be better going forward after him, even though they had more talent. Which leads me to another point. He can rally his team. He can bring the best out of his teammates. He brought the best out of Cat in that season. He brought the best out of Anthony Edwards, being a young guy with a lot of potential that you got to kind of try to like mold together. That was because of him, because prior to that, it was nothing going on in Minnesota. And people make fun of Pat Bev and them for celebrating the way they did when they won the play-in game, but they wasn't even supposed to make it that far. They wasn't even supposed to make the play-in. And behind Pat Bev's heart and soul, carrying them to there, yes, Cat was the best player on the team. Anthony Edwards was the second best player. D-Lo was the third player. I'm not saying Pat Bev was the best player, but I'm saying him being the leader of that team got them there. And we can't dispute that because, again, before that, Minnesota was doing nothing before they got Pat Bev. And I just think all of those characteristics of not being a superstar, but understanding what it takes to be a superstar. Again, like a Pat Riley or Greg Popovich or Phil Jackson. Playing hard. Loving the game of basketball. Like legitimately loving basketball. I think Pat Bev was the one who said it. A lot of guys in the NBA, the really good, especially the really good players, don't love basketball. They don't even really like it. They just happen to be tall. And this was a easy way to make some bread. They were tall and already good at the sport, so they play it because they could make a lot of money. But if that wasn't the case, they probably wouldn't be going to pickup games and stuff like that because they don't care. Pat Bev himself said 50% of the league don't like basketball. They play it because it's a quick buck, which is kind of sad in a way as a basketball fan, but you know, it is what it is. That's another conversation as well. But I think all those characteristics of being a leader, being the heart and soul of a team, understanding what it takes to be a star and to win, understanding how to talk to good players and bring the best out of them in the way that they can receive it. You see what I'm saying? Not how you perceive it, how they can receive it, because nobody else was able to get that out of Cat. When Pat Bev was on the team, that was Cat's best season statistically. He was actually coming into his own. He regressed this year. Being able to bring that out of different players is what a great coach is, or even a good coach is. And I think those characteristics directly relate to Patrick Beverly. If he decides to be a coach. I know he's doing the podcast, and I think maybe he's leaning more towards media, and that's okay too. But if he does decide to be a coach, I think he would be a good one. I think he would win a couple championships. I had my notes here. I was a little bit all over the place here in this episode. I was trying to piece it together so it made sense. Let me know in the comments down below if I was making sense. Let me know if I'm talking crazy and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about and this is a crazy theory and I'm stupid. Let me know if I got some merit to what I was saying. I just feel like those things in the past have been things that make a great coach. Not necessarily being the best player yourself, knowing the game, being smart about the game, knowing how to talk to players and bring the best out of players. I think all of those things can equal to a good coach, and all of those things are what Pat Bev are. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you ding that notification bell so you know every time I drop a video. And most of all, YouTube, I love you guys. Peace.
It's the 3 on PLAXtv.
Yeah.